The room was loud. Not angry loud, the kind of loud filled with laughter, phones in the air, and the buzzing energy of people watching something fun unfold. It was a casual film industry meetup. Bright lights, smiling faces, a relaxed atmosphere. No tension, no drama, just celebrities, cameras, and conversation. Bruce Lee stood near the edge of the room, calm as ever. His posture was relaxed, his eyes observant. He wasn't speaking much, just quietly watching, listening, and nodding politely as people passed by. On the other side of the room, Will Smith was holding court. He was laughing, telling stories, cracking jokes. People circled around him, soaking in every word. Cameras were pointed his way. Phones were recording. And every few seconds, another wave of laughter rippled through the crowd. Then something shifted. Will glanced toward Bruce. At first, it seemed harmless, just a playful look. But then came the comment. A joke. Light-hearted on the surface, but pointed, directed. The kind of joke that makes people laugh while quietly placing someone else in the spotlight. A few people chuckled. Someone whispered, "Did he really just say that?" Bruce didn't react. No smile, no frown, no sudden movement. He simply stood there, hands calmly at his sides, eyes steady, breathing slow. Will, noticing the silence, leaned into it. Another joke followed. Slightly louder, slightly sharper. The laughter grew, but this time it sounded different. Less comfortable. A few smiles tightened. Some people glanced at Bruce, waiting to see how he'd respond. Still, nothing. Bruce didn't interrupt. He didn't speak. He didn't walk away. He simply stood there, quiet, centered, unshaken. Phones began to rise higher now. People weren't just laughing anymore. They were watching, because something in the air had changed. It wasn't funny anymore. It felt like a test. Will smirked, clearly enjoying the attention. A few more words left his mouth, playful, teasing, public. But Bruce didn't flinch. He slowly lifted his eyes, not in anger, but with a calm that felt almost unsettling. The kind of calm that doesn't need noise. The kind that makes people pause without realizing why. A ripple of silence rolled through the crowd. Someone stopped recording. Another person whispered, "Wait, what's he going to do?" No one knew, but everyone could feel it. Whatever was about to happen next was about to change the entire room. And Bruce Lee was finally ready to speak. The silence didn't last long. Will Smith tilted his head slightly, as if trying to read Bruce Lee's expression. His smile didn't fade. In fact, it grew wider. He took a small step forward, sensing that all eyes were now shifting between the two men. "Well," he said lightly, lifting his hands in a playful shrug, "I didn't mean to make it awkward." A few people laughed again, but this time the laughter was thinner, hesitant. Some faces in the crowd showed curiosity. Others showed discomfort. Bruce remained still, calm. His face revealed nothing. Will continued. "You know," he added, glancing around the room, "it's always interesting meeting legends. You hear stories, you see movies, but sometimes you wonder how much of it is real, right?" A soft wave of murmurs rippled through the room. This time, Bruce slowly shifted his weight, turning his body slightly toward Will, not aggressively, but deliberately. He gave a respectful nod. "I appreciate your words," Bruce replied quietly, his voice steady and polite. "Every story has truth in it, but respect is what makes those stories meaningful." His response was simple, gentle, thoughtful, but it didn't land the way many expected. Will chuckled. "Hey, no offense, man. I'm just saying, times change. The world's different now." He lifted his phone, pretending to check something, then casually added, "I mean, people used to think a lot of things were impressive." A few people laughed again, louder than before. But others began shifting uncomfortably in place. The energy in the room was tightening. Several bystanders quietly raised their phones higher, now clearly recording the exchange. A young woman near the back whispered, "This feels uncomfortable." Another man shook his head slightly, eyes fixed on Bruce. Bruce didn't raise his voice. He didn't step forward. He didn't react emotionally. He simply stood there, centered, breathing slow, eyes calm. Will notice the growing attention. The circle around them tightened. He looked around, sensing the moment was becoming something bigger than a joke. "So, Bruce," he said, placing a hand on his chest, "don't take this the wrong way. It's all love." He paused, then added another playful remark, softer in tone, but sharper in meaning. The room fell into a strange half-silence. People weren't sure whether to laugh anymore. Some stopped smiling completely. Man near the front quietly lowered his phone, his face serious. Another person whispered, "This doesn't feel right." Bruce slowly inhaled. Then he spoke again, still calm, still controlled. "Words," he said gently, "carry more weight than we realize. And when we speak in public, we teach people how to treat each other." For a brief moment, the room went still. Will didn't reply right away. He shifted his stance slightly, clearly feeling the atmosphere change, though. He kept his confident smile, and that's when something interesting happened. More phones came out, not because it was funny anymore, but because people felt that something important was unfolding. Before the silence could settle, the narrator steps in. "Comment your country and city. Would you stay silent in this moment?" The camera zoomed slightly on Bruce's calm face, because whatever he was about to say next was no longer about jokes. It was about respect, and the room could feel it. The room didn't move. Not a chair. Not a footstep. Not even a cough. Every eye was now fixed on Bruce Lee. He stood quietly in the center of the circle, hands relaxed at his sides, breathing steady, like he wasn't standing in a room filled with tension, cameras, and rising emotions. Will Smith shifted his stance. He let out a light laugh, but it didn't sound as confident as before. His shoulders rolled back, and he tilted his head slightly. "Hey," he said casually, "we're all just having fun here." A few people nodded, but no one laughed. Bruce slowly lifted his eyes. His gaze met Will's, not with anger, but with a calm that felt heavier than any raised voice. "I understand," Bruce replied. "Fun is important, but so is dignity." His words were soft, but they landed like weight. The room went quiet again. Will smiled, but this time his smile didn't reach his eyes. He took a small step forward. "Come on, man," he said, lowering his voice just slightly. "You're reading too much into it." A few people in the crowd shifted awkwardly. Someone near the back whispered, "This is getting intense." Bruce nodded slowly. "When people are watching," he said, glancing briefly around the circle, "what we say becomes more than a joke. It becomes an example." A pause, a long one. The air felt thicker now. Will's jaw tightened slightly. He tried to laugh again, but the sound didn't carry. "Well," he replied, lifting his hands. No harm meant. But his tone had changed. He wasn't entertaining anymore. He was defending himself. Phones were now fully raised. Some people had stopped pretending this was entertainment. They were recording because it felt like something important, something real, was happening. Bruce took a slow step forward, not aggressively, not dramatically. Just one calm step. It was enough to make several people inhale sharply. "I'm not here to challenge you," Bruce said. "I'm here to remind you, and everyone watching, that respect is never outdated." His voice remained even, but something in his presence made the words feel larger than the room itself. A young man near the front whispered, Wow. Will didn't respond immediately. He glanced briefly at the people recording, then back at Bruce. You're saying I disrespected you? He asked. Bruce nodded gently. I'm saying that words can either lift people or quietly place them beneath us. Silence again. The kind of silence that feels uncomfortable because it forces everyone to think. Will shifted his weight. His arms crossed briefly, then dropped to his sides. He didn't look as relaxed anymore. The playful mood was gone. This was no longer a joke. Someone in the crowd whispered, "He's right." Another voice murmured agreement. Bruce remained composed, but now something in his posture felt firmer, more grounded. He wasn't raising his voice. He wasn't demanding anything. He was standing his ground, calmly, respectfully, unshakably, and that was exactly what made the moment powerful. Will exhaled slowly, his gaze flicking away for a second before returning to Bruce. The energy had shifted. What started as light teasing had now become something deeper, something about values, dignity, and presence. The room could feel it, and just when it seemed like the moment might settle, Bruce added one more sentence, not loud, not dramatic. Just clear. Strength, he said quietly, is not shown by making others smaller. A hush swept through the room. People lowered their phones slightly, stunned by the calm authority in his voice. And that's when the narrator cuts in. If you were in Bruce's place, would you stand your ground or walk away? Type stand or walk in the comments. The camera slowly zooms on Will's face because something in his expression had changed. Confidence, the humor, the comfort. They were starting to slip, and Bruce Lee wasn't done yet. The room had shifted. It wasn't loud anymore. It wasn't playful. It wasn't even tense in the usual way. It was focused. Every eye, every phone, every whisper, all of it centered on Bruce Lee. Bruce stood silently for a moment, letting the atmosphere settle. He didn't move dramatically. He didn't flare his eyes. He simply exhaled slowly, a calm rhythm that seemed to influence everyone around him. Will Smith's smirk, once playful and confident, had faded into something more uncertain. He was aware now, aware that this wasn't just a friendly tease, and the audience was noticing too. People were no longer laughing. Their attention had shifted. Bruce tilted his head slightly, scanning the crowd. He wasn't looking at anyone aggressively. He wasn't looking to dominate. He was simply observing, quietly commanding the room with his presence. Power, he began, his voice calm, measured, and steady, is not proven by laughter or fear. It is proven by the respect you inspire, not the fear you command. The room froze. Phones hovered in the air. Mouths went slightly open. Whispers began. Did he just say that? Will shifted uncomfortably. He opened his mouth to speak, but Bruce's calm gaze held him in place. The kind of gaze that isn't a threat, but isn't to be ignored either. Bruce took a small step forward, not aggressive, not dramatic, just a subtle step. It was enough. The subtle movement, combined with his quiet authority, made the people around them lean in without realizing it. The energy in the room was magnetic. The attention had fully flipped. Someone in the crowd whispered, He's controlling the energy without even raising his voice. Bruce's voice softened. Words are heavier than we think. They shape perception. They define how people treat one another. The crowd held their collective breath. They weren't just witnessing a conversation. They were witnessing a lesson in presence, in restraint, in power without aggression. Will shifted his weight, a subtle sign of doubt crossing his usually confident posture. The playful energy was gone. He was now thinking about what was unfolding, thinking about how people were seeing him, thinking about the words Bruce had just spoken. Bruce paused for a moment, letting that weight sink in. He didn't rush. He didn't force the reaction. Then he added quietly, but with precision, "Strength is measured in stillness, not noise. Influence is earned through integrity, not intimidation." Phones lowered slightly. A soft murmur of agreement passed through the room. Some people even nodded subtly, as if they had just witnessed a truth they couldn't argue with. Will opened his mouth to reply again, but this time he paused mid-word. He looked around and realized the energy in the room had shifted completely. The attention, once on his humor and presence, was now firmly on Bruce. The power wasn't in the words Bruce had spoken, it was in the way he was calm, centered, unshakable. He didn't have to raise his voice. He didn't have to make a show. He simply existed in a way that commanded respect. A few people in the crowd whispered to each other, "I've never seen anyone do that." It's like he's controlling the whole room without even trying. The tension grew, not the kind that makes you uncomfortable, but the kind that makes you lean in, mentally trapped, emotionally invested. Every viewer watching would feel it. The calm force of one man in the middle of chaos, showing that true strength doesn't need to fight to be felt. And then Bruce paused. The air thickened. Phones raised again. People leaned in, waiting, because whatever was about to come next was no longer a test of humor. It was a lesson in mastery. Have you ever felt someone's calm energy control a room? Comment yes or nitrogen monoxide and where you're watching from. The camera slowly pans over the crowd, showing the subtle reactions, eyes wide. Whispers, a mix of admiration and tension. Will Smith's confident posture wavered. The playful energy had disappeared. The attention was no longer on the joke. It was on Bruce Lee's silent power, and the room, everyone in it, was hanging on his next words, because Bruce wasn't just responding to a joke anymore. He was teaching a masterclass in presence. The room was electric, not loud, not chaotic, but charged. Every heartbeat, every breath seemed synchronized with the invisible rhythm Bruce Lee had set. Will Smith's playful demeanor had vanished. His eyes flicked nervously around the room. The crowd, once laughing, now stood in quiet anticipation, some holding their phones mid-recording, unsure whether to capture or simply watch. Bruce Lee didn't move dramatically. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't glare. He simply shifted his weight slightly, his presence commanding without force. And in that subtle motion, every person in the room leaned in. "You see," Bruce began, his voice calm yet piercing, "true strength is not shown by making others feel small. Influence is not earned by fear, sarcasm, or humiliation." The words hung in the air like heavy fog, dense and impossible to ignore. Will swallowed. He opened his mouth, but the words got caught somewhere between instinct and realization. His usual charisma, the humor that had once ruled the room, faltered under Bruce's calm authority. Bruce continued, stepping just enough closer that his gaze met Will's directly. Not aggressively, not challengingly, simply firmly, clearly, undeniably. "When you speak," Bruce said slowly, deliberately, "you either build or destroy. And when you build respect, it becomes stronger than any laughter or applause you can gather." The room had gone utterly silent. Phones were still in hands, but they were no longer tools for entertainment. They were witnesses. The energy was no longer a joke. It was gravity, a force no one could escape. A few people whispered, "I can't believe he's saying this calmly," and still making the room hold its breath. Will shifted, stepping back slightly, a reflexive attempt to reclaim control, but it failed. Bruce's calm was heavier than Will's humor. His presence wasn't just quiet power. It was a psychological weight, grounding every spectator in the gravity of the moment. "You can try to dominate a room with jokes," Bruce continued, "but true mastery True mastery comes from self-control, from dignity, from knowing your own value without needing to belittle another. For a split second, Will's eyes widened. He realized that the crowd's attention, the energy, the admiration, it was all shifting away from him. And the realization stung. Bruce didn't shout. He didn't slam a hand. He didn't attack. He simply existed with authority, a living example of confidence, discipline, and respect. Several spectators whispered among themselves, "This is incredible. He's controlling everyone without moving aggressively." Another person muttered, "It's like you can't help but respect him." Will exhaled slowly, trying to regain composure. But the charm and humor that had ruled the room before no longer had the same weight. Bruce had silently claimed the moral high ground, and the energy in the room confirmed it. Bruce paused for a moment, letting the words settle. Every pause in his speech was deliberate, magnifying the effect. "Respect," he added softly, almost like a teacher correcting a lesson gently, "is earned through humility, not intimidation. Through calmness, not chaos. Through integrity, not laughter at another's expense." The crowd was spellbound. Some faces showed awe. Others nodded subtly. Phones lowered again, some people whispering, He's showing what real strength looks like." Will Smith's posture slumped slightly. He opened his mouth once more but thought better of it. The playful, joking energy had been replaced entirely by Bruce's quiet authority. The room no longer reacted to jokes. It reacted to presence. Bruce's final sentence of this moment carried weight beyond the words themselves. Power is silent. Influence is invisible until you realize it's already holding the room. The crowd exhaled collectively. Phones went down. Eyes shifted from recording to observing. Even Will Smith had no choice but to acknowledge, silently, mentally, emotionally, the lesson Bruce Lee had delivered. Have you ever seen someone remain calm and take control without raising their voice? Comment yes or nitrogen monoxide and share what you would do in this moment. The camera pans across the room. Faces frozen in awe. Whispered confirmations of Bruce's authority. Will Smith's confident persona quietly fading into realization. Bruce Lee had not raised a hand. He had not shouted. Yet the room's energy, the attention, the respect, all had shifted completely. And the audience at home? Mentally trapped. Emotionally invested. Waiting to see what would happen next. Because this moment, this one subtle display of calm mastery, had just set the stage for something that would silence everyone watching. The room was completely still. It wasn't the silence of awkwardness anymore. It wasn't the suspenseful pause of anticipation. It was the silence of recognition. Everyone there, from the closest onlookers to those recording from the edges, could feel it. Bruce Lee's presence had shifted the energy in the room entirely. The playful humor, the teasing, the sense of casual fun, all of it had vanished, replaced by a profound respect that didn't need words. Will Smith exhaled slowly. His usual grin was gone. He looked around, noticing the subtle changes. Heads nodding, phones lowering, whispers turning into murmurs of admiration. The room was no longer his stage. It was Bruce's. Bruce didn't speak immediately. He didn't need to. His posture alone, calm, centered, unshakable, communicated every lesson he had silently been teaching. Every subtle gesture, every slow blink, every deliberate breath conveyed that real strength wasn't about jokes or bravado. Finally, Bruce addressed the room, his voice still gentle but firm, carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Respect," he said, "is not something you demand. It is something you inspire. Not through noise or mockery, but through how you carry yourself, how you honor others, and how you act when no one is applauding." A ripple of nods passed through the crowd. Some people whispered softly, He's right. Others leaned closer, as if wanting to catch every word. Every nuance of tone will shifted again, almost unconsciously. His confident, playful energy was replaced by contemplation. He realized in that quiet, charged room that he was no longer the focus. Bruce had claimed it, not by shouting, not by theatrics, but by being wholly himself. "Thank you," Will finally said, his tone subdued, his usual charm tempered with humility. I didn't expect that. You've taught me something here." The crowd murmured softly in approval. Phones that had been recording for laughs now captured something entirely different, a lesson in calm power, a demonstration of mastery that didn't need violence, shouting, or ego. Bruce nodded slightly, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and the tension that had gripped the room began to dissolve. People were smiling again. But this time the smiles carried admiration, awe, and inspiration. The energy shifted further when one bystander, braver than most, whispered to others, he didn't have to fight him. He didn't even have to argue. He just showed who he is. And that was the truth. Bruce Lee had not raised his voice. He had not made threats. He had not even escalated the tension artificially. Yet the influence he held, the respect he commanded, was undeniable. Every person in that room, including Will Smith, understood it instinctively. Some people began clapping softly, almost hesitantly at first. Then others joined in. A ripple turned into a wave. Cheers and applause filled the space, not for a performance, not for a joke, not for a movie star, but for humility, integrity, and mastery of self. Will Smith, standing beside Bruce, raised his hands in acknowledgement. There was no showmanship, no bravado, just a quiet nod, a subtle recognition that he had been humbled in the most profound way, not by confrontation, not by violence, but by calm authority and dignity. The crowd erupted in whispers and quiet cheering, many still holding phones, now fully aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. Videos would eventually go online. Clips would spread. Millions would watch at home and feel the power of a man who had silenced the room with nothing but presence and respect. Have you ever seen someone stay completely calm and win a situation without raising their voice? Share your story in the comments. Bruce stepped back slightly, letting the moment breathe. The energy in the room had shifted irreversibly. Respect had replaced humor. Admiration had replaced tension. And those watching, both in the room and at home, understood a universal truth: power is silent. Influence is subtle. Respect is earned, never demanded. Will Smith's initial attempt to dominate with jokes and charm had been dismantled not by confrontation, but by unwavering calm, clear integrity, and a quiet moral force. The room, once buzzing with playful laughter, now resonated with awe. The lesson was clear, immediate, and unforgettable. True mastery doesn't need to fight. It simply exists, and in that moment, everyone, including Will, recognized it. Bruce Lee had transformed the energy of the room, and the moment would never be forgotten. The moment was over in the room, but the impact had just begun. Phones buzzed, videos uploaded, whispers turned into online posts, and within hours the world would see what had unfolded. The footage was not a joke. It wasn't a playful exchange. It was a masterclass in respect, humility, and quiet power. Will Smith's playful smirk had been replaced by a reflective, humbled look. The room had cheered for Bruce Lee, not for theatrics, not for a performance, but for the authority of dignity. And the videos would make that undeniable to millions across the globe. Within hours, clips of the encounter flooded social media. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag Bruce Lee respect, hashtag power in silence, #lessons from legends. Comments poured in from every corner of the world. I've never seen someone control a room with calmness like that. This isn't just a celebrity story. This is a life lesson. Respect is the real power. Bruce Lee proved it today. Millions were captivated, mentally and emotionally trapped by the contrast of humor versus integrity, ego versus discipline, noise versus presence. People replayed the clips, not because it was entertaining, but because it made them feel something deep inside. News outlets picked it up. Commentators analyzed the interaction. Social media influencers broke down the moment frame by frame. The takeaway was clear: strength is silent, and respect is earned through integrity. Not jokes. Will Smith, reflecting privately, acknowledged the truth in Bruce's words. It wasn't humiliation he had experienced, it was a lesson. A reminder that charm, humor, or bravado can entertain, but they cannot replace authenticity, calm authority, or moral grounding. Meanwhile, viewers worldwide began sharing personal stories. People commented about times they had faced ridicule, confrontation, or unfair treatment, and how they wished they had the calm mastery Bruce displayed. Discussions spread across countries, cultures, and languages. The lesson was universal. And the world noticed. Not only was Bruce Lee being praised for his composure, but Will Smith also became part of a larger conversation, a conversation about humility, awareness, and the transformative power of respect. The viral moment wasn't about winning an argument. It was about showing how dignity can transform every interaction. Some viewers wrote, "I watched from Tokyo, Japan, and I could feel the power even through the screen." From New York City, USA, never underestimate quiet confidence. London, UK, here, this changed how I think about confrontation entirely. Millions were engaging, mentally hooked, emotionally inspired, commenting, sharing, reflecting. The story wasn't just a clip. It was a lesson delivered worldwide, perfectly packaged in a moment of tension. Restraint and mastery. And in the room, Will Smith nodded subtly, silently acknowledging what everyone else had already understood. Bruce Lee had won, not with force, but with presence. The viral aftermath carried an undeniable message. Strength is silent. Influence is subtle. Respect is earned through integrity, not ego. For those watching online, this wasn't just entertainment. It was a call to action, to reflect on how we treat others, how we respond under pressure, and how true mastery is demonstrated in calmness, not noise. If you believe respect is the real power, type respect in the comments and share where you're watching from. Subscribe for more stories that inspire, teach, and change the way you see the world. The moment had started as a playful encounter. It ended as a global lesson in dignity, control, and humility, one that would be replayed, discussed, and remembered for years to come. Bruce Lee had not just silenced a room. He had silenced the noise of the world long enough for everyone to feel the weight of true respect.